Welcome. I'm super excited to introduce you to color management in Premiere 25.2 and newer. This new color management just makes it a whole lot easier to work with log and raw media than ever before inside of Premiere. Now, you can jump ahead in this video to the next section if you already understand some of the challenges with log and raw, but I wanted to take a moment to kind of describe exactly what the heck is going on inside of Adobe Premiere and why we need something like color management. And to get started, I'm actually going to start with a sequence where I've got all of everything is turned off here. This is a sequence that actually shows what log media looks like. And in some cases, some raw media. So I've got some red R3D files, some Canon files. I've got some footage here that was shot on a Fuji camera, some Apple log footage, and all of these clips tend to have one thing in common, which is they all kind of look a bit washed out. Log is revolutionary as far as a recording format for cameras because it preserves the highlights and it preserves the detail in the shadows. And it does this by kind of giving a lot of extra headroom. The chip itself on the camera can handle brighter parts without blowing out. It can handle detail in shadowy areas that would normally be clipped off and be invisible. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tool if you are going to take the time to go back in and do some color grading to really kind of play with the footage and extract those details out. If you're not, or if you just want to look at it in a way that looks pretty good just right out of the gate, you need to do something to your footage. And that is where color management kicks in. A lot of us have dealt with things called LUT files, and there are these technical files. I'll show an example in a second here that take this footage where the detail in the highlights and the shadows has been preserved, but the footage looks all milky. It kind of stretches it back out and makes it look good. But putting those files on each individual camera can be a pain. The other issue is every camera handles this a little bit differently. Sony log is different from Arri log, which is different from Canon log, which is different from Red log 3G10. And so the ability to being able to work with all these different formats required a lot of just very meticulous management of putting the right LUT file on the right piece of footage, transcode it all so that you're editing something that has been already converted into 709. There's a lot of ways that we've had to handle this. And the whole goal with this is to make this easier than ever before inside of Adobe Premiere. So if you're following along at home and want your screen to look the same as mine, I'm actually using the color workspace. And if you played around with this for a while or you've kind of changed it to suit your own needs, you can reset it to the saved layout to get the same look that I've got here. I've basically got the Lumetri scopes open here. I've got my program monitor here, and I've got the Lumetri color panel over on the right-hand side. We're going to be doing a lot with the Lumetri color panel, particularly going into the settings so that I can show you exactly what's going on under the hood. So let's move away from this sequence here. But in this case, this sequence, I've disabled color management, and I've done that very deliberately just so I can show you what log looks like. It's great to just understand what is going on under the hood and seeing like the darkest parts of the video here. In this case, the rider's pants here they're peaking down at around 20 IRE or 20 nits. This should be closer to the 0 marker down here, but writing it directly to that 0 marker in camera means that things can clip and you can lose detail in the shadows. This is showing that there's still a lot of detail in the shadows, but at the same time, I can use color grading tools to actually bring that down and really start to make this look good. We just want to do something automatically to this. We want to work with this footage and get it to look good for 709 color space to begin with. So really, to get started with this, what I need to do is start on ingest with my clips. I need to have color management enabled. The easiest way to do that from this color workspace is simply go to the Lumetri color panel and go to the settings tab that you see up here at the top. This is kind of your one-stop shop for having color management enabled and to see all of the different settings that you need to have in order to make this work correctly. So to start with, under preferences, make sure that this display color management option that you see right here is turned on. This is something that is required. It's kind of the master switch for everything that I'm showing you here. So we want to make sure that that is turned on. This extended dynamic range monitoring option that you see here is something that you want to turn on if your monitor supports high dynamic range, such as the HDR10 standard or HLG standard, which are two of the HDR formats that Premiere Pro supports natively. You can leave it off if you have an older monitor, but this is something that you may also want to have turned on. And then on a project basis, or if you're working inside of a Premiere production, on a production basis, you'll see that there are some settings here for color management. And this one in particular, we absolutely need to make sure is on. Color manage auto-detected log and raw media. This is also one of those master switches that you want to make sure and throw, because this is going to make sure that as your clips are brought into the project, Premiere is going to read the tags. It's going to try and do the right thing for you automatically. And then lastly, this enable color space aware effects, turn that on as well. That makes sure that the color tools like Lumetri Color in Premiere are color space aware and can take advantage of the latest and greatest. Okay, once we've done that, I'll just switch over to a different sequence here. This is a sequence where I do have color management enabled. This actually all starts with the clips themselves. So if I take my project panel, I'll just blow this up full screen here so that you can see this. I've got a wide range of different types of media inside of my project. We've got some Arri footage, some Canon, some Fuji. I've got some iPhone in both the HDR flavor and the ProRes log flavor, R3D files, and then finally some footage from a Sony FX3. All of this footage is now color managed in Premiere. And if you want to see this just on a clip-by-clip basis, you can go in and you can select clips and go to modify color to see the individual color settings that are being used here. So the Sony footage in this case is Sony S-Log3 S-Gamut 3 Cine. That is the color profile that is being used for this footage. You don't necessarily even have to know that, just know that Premiere is automatically detecting it. It's doing the correct math that we've gotten from Sony to take that log footage and expand it out into beautiful 709 or other formats as needed. So what this means is we auto detect these different files automatically. If I go into my R3D files and just take a handful of these, we'll do the exact same thing here. Go into modify color. You can see that these are being recognized as red log 3G10. So this just is going to give me a good result right out of the gate. There are going to be times where your footage may not auto recognize, especially if somebody has gone through and transcoded the footage. These little tags that tell Premiere what color space to use, they can get lost in a transcode on occasion. I've got an example of that here with this Fuji footage. I'll go ahead and select this, go to modify color. And you'll see in this case, the media color space is showing as 709. I'll show you what this footage looks like in a minute. We saw some of it on that unmanaged timeline a minute ago. But basically, by doing a batch selection of clips like this, I can always choose to override the media color space, and I can pick the correct profile from here. And this is just a great way to see all the different profiles that are being automatically detected from my footage. So this includes things like DJI D-Log, it includes Arri Log, it includes Nikon, Leica, Panasonic, Sony. They're all listed in here so that we're trying to do the right thing when we can read these tags, but we're also giving you sort of a master control so that in those rare cases where it doesn't quite work the way you want it to, you can go in and pick the correct setting as needed. Now, one other thing I also wanted to talk about is there are some cameras that don't tag their footage as log, but they actually come in with a LUT file pre-attached to your footage. This is mostly something we see from cameras like the Area Mira. And I've got a couple of examples here. I'll just select a range of these clips. And again, I'll go to Modify Color. And you'll see here that these clips are actually coming in with a LUT file. They're coming in with the Arri Log C2 Video 709 profile. And in this case, they're using the media color space as 709 because this LUT file is doing the transfer for us. It's doing the conversion from that log video over into 709 for us. Now, you may want to just keep them as is. That's perfectly fine. But there are some disadvantages to just throwing and stacking a LUT file on top of the footage, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Basically, the mathematics of when the conversion is happening to 709, that should be more as like an output step rather than doing it just as the footage is coming in and getting dropped on the timeline. So in certain circumstances, if you want to keep doing LUT management, you want to keep the LUTs from the camera, you're more than welcome to do that. This is the place where you can go in and you can turn those LUTs on and off. In this case, I'm just going to say none. And I'm going to override the media color space here. And I know that these clips are Arri Log C3. So I'm going to go ahead and select Arri Log C3 Wide Gamut so that the Premiere transform is actually doing the work rather than the LUT. I'll explain exactly why that's a really good thing to note in just a little bit. Okay, so this is kind of the first stage in doing this. If you want to just see this on a clip-by-clip basis, I mentioned the Lumetri color settings here. You'll notice there's an area here called Source Clip. And as I click through any of these clips here, you'll see the exact same settings showing up here on a clip-by-clip basis. But I wanted to make sure you understood that if you ever need to modify stuff, particularly if you've got a whole card of footage that's coming in wrong, you can just select all and right-click, modify, and make one change, and it'll update all the clips in that group at the same time. Okay, the second area where color makes a big change is in the sequence settings. So by going up to sequence settings, you'll see that there is a color management area here. And this color setup that you see here is a very, very important setting. I've got it currently set to the default setting that Premiere ships with in 25.2. This may change in the future because there are some new options in here. But DirectRec 709 is sort of the older color pipeline. It's what's always been in Premiere. We're keeping it the same so that if you already know I adjust this Lumetri slider here and I get this result, there's not like a huge sudden shift in how these tools work. So we're trying to make sure that there's no unwanted hidden surprises here. If you have older projects that you've already used Lumetri on, when you import them into 25.2, this is going to be the color setup that's going to be used. However, there is something brand new in Premiere, and it is a new wide gamut color setup. And these wide gamut options in here kind of unlock a lot more power that you can have with your color grading directly inside of Premiere. Let me see if I can kind of explain this. So the older pipeline, the way this worked was it would take your log and raw media and do an immediate conversion on the input step into DirectRec 709. And so when we were working inside of the Lumetri color panel, we were in this color space that couldn't take full advantage of the log and raw media. We were kind of converting down from, a log file down into Rec 709, and then we were playing in this smaller sandbox. So the way the sliders would work wouldn't always take full advantage of what was in the original source media. With Wide Gamut is something that it unlocks a lot more capability. Wide Gamut is a larger sandbox. It means that it recognizes the difference between the brightest parts of the video and the darkest parts of the video in full. And it gives us the ability to preserve more of those highlights, more of those shadows, because we're dropping the footage into this wide gamut mode. And then on output, we're getting it back down and crunching it back down into 709, which is typically what most of us are delivering today. So this idea of splitting the working color space and the output color space into two different sets of calculations, it really unlocks a lot of power. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So I'm going to start with DirectRec 709 here. And I've got a sequence here. These clips, these are all some of these log clips that we had before. And in this case, we're actually seeing some of the different results. This is Fuji footage. You can see if I select this clip, if I come over here, I can see my source clip settings. Here's that Fuji F-Log2 setting that we're using on these clips. Here is an ARRI clip, and if I click on this, in this case, I believe this clip is using the override. This is something that you can see there. It's using the Premiere Color Science, the ARRI Log C3 Wide Gamut 3 setting, and the LUT is turned off. If the LUT was on, I would see it right there. I'd have the ability to toggle that on and off. Here is one of these Sony clips. This is a Sony S-Log3 clip. They're all getting managed. They all don't have that washed out log look to them. They actually look really, really nice. And that is kind of color management in a nutshell. It's that idea of doing something to transform this footage so it looks good during editorial. A producer's not going to lean in and go, ooh, is it really going to look that washed out and flat? It means that we've got a really nice starting place. And if you want to do color grading on top of this, this becomes kind of the starting place that can try and take full advantage of this. Now, I mentioned this DirectRec 709 is kind of the wrong time to be converting everything to 709. And this is the other big part of color management. If I go to my sequence settings, and again, I can do that right here in the Lumetri panel. Here is my sequence settings for color. Here is the color setup, and it's currently set to DirectRec 709. Just as a quick example of this, I'm going to go into my Lumetri panel. And I'm not going to dive too deep into all the different settings here. We're just going to do something fairly simple so that we can see what's going on here. I'm going to take the exposure on this clip that I have selected in my timeline, and I'll go ahead and bring this down. And you can see right now, it's just kind of crushing everything down. If this is really log footage, I should be seeing the headlight should be a little bit brighter. I should see some nice specularity in the white scooter here. I'll show another example here. We'll do the same thing on this clip here. I'll just bring the exposure down. And because the outside and the inside, there's such an amazing dynamic range between the bright outdoors and the shadow in the car, things like the arm that's in bright sunlight should be a lot brighter. So this exposure slider, it's doing what it's supposed to do, but because the processing is happening in 709 space, it doesn't look as good as it possibly could. And this is where that wide gamut option really, really shines. All I'm going to do is go back to my settings and I'm going to say, hey, sequence, don't do your processing in 709, use the new wide gamut space. And I'm going to go ahead and just flip this single toggle switch, and you'll immediately notice a difference. Let me just turn that on and off here so that you can see. Here is before, here is after. You can see how the scope improves. We're now seeing a lot more dynamic range and detail in this shot. We can still see details in the shadows, even though we've lowered the exposure. But more importantly, we're really seeing the blue sky and a lot of the detail out the window here. If I go back to the scooter, again, here is before and here is after. So by making this change under the hood, it means that the tools in panels like the Lumetri panel, other color tools that affect color in Premiere will do the calculations differently in Wide Gamut. And if you're editing working with log footage, you're going to see different results. We hope it's a more pleasing result and it's a better result than you have ever seen in Premiere before. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about something in the source monitor that you should also be aware of. I'm one of those people that I like the source monitor to be kind of like my source of truth. And for this example, I'm actually going to take this clip, I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to use the Fill option here so that we get rid of the black bars top and bottom here, just because I wanted to kind of demonstrate how this works. I'm going to go ahead and hit the match frame key. The default for that's the F key on the keyboard here. And by doing this, I'm loading this clip up in the source monitor. I'm actually looking at the exact same frame here. The way the source monitor has always been designed is it's designed to kind of be a source of truth to what your footage is on disk. It's designed to show you the entire raster size of what you have on disk. And what the footage looks like without any sequence-based effects applied to them. So right now we are looking at this. Since I did that fill, we're actually clipping a little bit top and bottom or a little bit left and right, actually left and right here. So I can actually see all the pixels in the frame here. And that's one of the ways that we use the source monitor sometimes if we have to determine how much overscan do we have, how much room do we have to kind of do a little bit of repositioning of the footage in this timeline. Sometimes you want to see what's on disk for color as well. The default mode that the source monitor is in for color is to mimic the color of the sequence. So if this sequence is in the Wide Gamut mode, I'm going to see Wide Gamut color up here in my source monitor as well. It's basically going to match the two together. I'm not seeing the effect that's on this clip in the timeline, which is the exposure effect we did just a minute ago. But I'm seeing the color of the effect as it's been transformed for this particular sequence. If you want to see log, there is actually a feature under the wrench menu here. If I click the wrench and go to Monitor Color Management, there's an option in here to show Wide Gamut source media as log. So if I turn that on, you can actually pixel peep and look at this and say, yep, that's log footage. I can see how Premiere is transforming it. It's just kind of a nice thing to know if you ever have any questions of what you have on disk when it comes to color, and you just quickly want to look at a clip with all the color management turned back off again. It's an easy switch to throw. And by the way, throwing that switch on a sequence basis is super easy. Just select your sequence and go to your color setup, and you'll notice that there is an option down here called Disable Color Management. A couple other quick things of note here. I've been doing this demonstration mostly focused on 709 color space, since that's what the majority of us are delivering to. That's kind of the standard for standard dynamic range video that most of us are familiar with. If you are one of those folks that are actually delivering high dynamic range out of Adobe Premiere, if you're working inside of Wide Gamut, note that this output color space, this is where we're kind of bringing things back down to legal values. So if we're going from log, we're going into a wide playground, and then from there, we're going back down to 709. If you are delivering for high dynamic range, this is where you can throw a toggle switch to actually work with and see PQ or HLG in using this Wide Gamut mode as well. So this isn't necessarily just going to let you grade for standard definition and then suddenly throw one switch and it's just going to look perfect for high dynamic range. You are still going to want to play with the values and things, but this makes it very easy to just duplicate a sequence and have that PQ or HLG deliverable alongside of your standard dynamic range deliverable. So hope that helps. Now, the last thing that I want to really dive into is dynamic link. So dynamic link is, of course, the way of getting Premiere and After Effects to work together. In this case, I'm actually going to stick within the DirectX 709 mode here. It just simplifies things down a little bit because After Effects isn't going to show you the result of what you're working on with the tone mapping that Premiere uses. But there is a really nice way if you just need to jump over to After Effects to add like a rain simulator, or you need to add some sort of rotoscope effect or something on your clips, it now works better in this release than it has in a long, long time. And what this does look like here, if I take this clip, I'm currently working in Rec 709. I'm doing my processing in Rec 709, but I just need to do something on this clip. I can right click on it, go to replace After Effects composition. Now, Premiere does this work on a sequence level. After Effects does color management on a project level. So it's best to let Premiere fire off and create the After Effects project that we need. So I'm going to call this one Rain Sim and just hit save. And this has created a new project for me. If I go into project settings, I can see that color management has been enabled. It's currently picked a Rec 709 profile to work in. It's doing the work for me to set up my project for success. And the pixels that I see here should look pretty much the same as the pixels I'm seeing over here. Now, the other thing that's also happening is this is a ProRes log file. And if I right click on it here in the comp and go to interpret footage, color, you'll see that this is matching the media color space. It recognizes the media color space. So all of that information is now passing over from Premiere over into After Effects to try and do the right thing. Now, does it work in every circumstance? No, it doesn't. I'm going to be truthful here, particularly if you're using the new Wide Gamut mode. Wide Gamut is, of course, adding that output color space option, and that would be something that I would have to manually set up here inside of my project. There are methods of making this work. It just takes a little bit more work to understand exactly how that would be happening. Using the older color management, this doesn't have a display color space option at this point. But this is something that if you're really into this, you know what you're doing, you could flip this over into an open color IO color engine, and then you would have this idea of a display color space, and you could try and match the modes in that fashion. So does it work super smooth in every circumstance? No, but it works way better than it has in the past, particularly if you're just trying to do something like, in this case, maybe I just want to add a little bit of a rainfall to add to the drama of this shot here. I'll go ahead and I'll increase the drops, just make this look a little bit bigger. I'll just bring this a little bit bigger here so we can see this. Now we've got some rain on these guys. And if I go back to Premiere, and I hit play, I can see the rainfall effect happening here. So this is that live dynamic link that I have with After Effects, and I could go back and forth to tweak this further. And I'm not seeing the big color shift that I used to see, where suddenly when this clip was sent over to After Effects, it suddenly looks log. Now we're actually preserving the color management from Premiere over into After Effects in certain circumstances. So your mileage may vary. Play with it. Have some fun with it. Just know that the team is very much committed to Adobe Dynamic Link, and how Dynamic Link works between Premiere and After Effects is something that we're working on some more improvements for. So this is everything for 25.2 and newer for Premiere. Hope you have some fun with it. Again, make sure and turn on display color management. Play with this color managed auto detected log and raw media setting. That's very important to turn on. And then from there, just have a play in Premiere. See how this works with these different modes enabled, and let us know what you think. Thanks.